Okay, welcome back. It's time for the GalleryAbominate for facial expressions. Let's have a look and see what we see. So this week I'm on about some hyper-realistic sculptures. That's kind of a genre in art, in the art world. And this is one of them. Essentially these guys sculpt and then they cast it in silicone and they pigment it, just kind of like people do in prosthetics for visual effects. Okay, so let's have a look at this guy and see what you guys think. You can just have a look for a minute for yourselves. I don't have any other views, but everything I want to talk about is in this view. So maybe you can figure it out just by looking. There's a few things that are that don't sit right with me, but there's one that kind of really stands out. Okay, and it has to do with the facial expressions that we talked about this lecture this week. I'm going to give you a hint. It's up in the upper face, and I don't know if that helps. But anyways, let me break it down for you like this, okay? If we're talking about action units, right, we can kind of gauge what the expression is based on the evidence that we see, which is the things I discussed, the line of the brow, the wrinkles that are forming, how much white of the eye is showing, the shape of the lips. Those are kind of our metrics for measuring this. And so what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing pretty steep angle to the brow, and I'm seeing a nice little kind of wrinkle from corrugator, right, from the brow down muscle. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff we get up here as well, so that's kind of cool, the attachment into the skin. So this looks like expression action unit 4, right? So kind of a big kind of diagonal here. We have a big peak to the brows, right? And kind of a descent back down, and that kind of makes me think that he's doing an outer up kind of action unit 2 out here, which would raise these and wrinkle this up, and that seems to be the case. But what doesn't quite work is that this set of wrinkles coming in here ends up going up right here, even though the brow is down, right? We can't really have this the brow wrinkles up and the action unit 4 down around the glabella. It just doesn't work. This one's pulling up and this one's pulling down, and they don't do that. What happens is if you have this working, as this indicates brow up in the middle, right, the flow of the wrinkles, what ends up happening is you get the sadness expression, right? If you do action unit 4 here and action unit 1, they combine to have this arc of the brow, right? They pull up these wrinkles and elevate them up onto the forehead, right? And that's what gives you the classic sad brow, right? Neutral through here, and then or pulled down on the outside from corrugator, and then elevated. Essentially, all of corrugator gets elevated by the inner frontalis, right? And so that's how it would go, and then you would have kind of associated with that a descent on the lateral side of the upper eyelid fold, right? Just kind of go down a little bit over the eyelids, a bit more, and then it totally changes the emotion of the piece, right? But as it's read right now, or as it reads, this is kind of sending mixed signals that you can't actually emote. You can't do brow up and brow down, right? The skin in here would tear. Okay. Beyond that, there's a few other things that are a little bit funny for me. I don't believe that his nostrils terminate like this onto the upper lip, right? They're just almost like chopped off and fused on. They don't have any of the characteristic kind of insertion, kind of this little crescent gesture that goes in. And the other thing is, he seems to be doing, just given the big arc of his lower lip, he seems to be doing kind of a depressor anguli down here, right? His lip corner depressor. but I don't see any evidence of the bagging down here. Remember, if you're going to do a corner depressor, all of this is going to be kind of building up some shape, right? And some volume is going to happen up here. His lip shape suggests that. You know, we have nice pointy kind of descent, but there's no forms around the jaw to suggest that. So in general, I think that it's kind of just mixing some shapes from observation and not really understanding the implication of what he's putting in, okay? Which is often in the what people do with wrinkles, especially if they don't really understand what they're derived from. Case in point, right? This is actually the same realist sculptor on the right, and then this is some guy's copy of the realist sculptor on the left. So we have kind of a perfect storm of opportunities for problems, okay? So my main thing with this is the original picture, right? And you can see kind of two critical problems. Well, obviously there's a few kind of structural transitional problems, but the main problem obviously is right here, okay? And that's not understanding what he's sculpting, right? He's not understanding what he's observed, and he's ended up overstating it, right? He's made these minor forms into major forms. Essentially, it looks like there's train tracks or something going under his eyelid, like model train tracks. And here is quite a bit more subtle and almost naturalistic. I think that probably this might be, I don't know, this doesn't look quite right to me here either, but it's a lot closer. So that's one thing. The second thing is the kind of the, well, I guess the representation of the brow folds, or kind of this corrugator line. These don't quite look like they're the result of a brow down, right? They don't look like corrugators pulled it down and given us a collection of skin here, which is motivating this wrinkle. Quite a bit better here, right? You can see a depression here anyways, right? That's the big secret, is all the skin that's going to give us this is pulled from somewhere, right? And the lighting isn't great on this, so we can't really make out the relief of it, but that's what we expect. We expect a little bit of a cavity up here, and when you don't, and these mountains just appear out of nowhere with a sharp line, it doesn't read properly, right? The forms, the intermediate forms, need to collide to make a wrinkle, to motivate a wrinkle to form a crease. Okay, next on the list, look at the nasolabial furrow, right? It's just a straight line. It just goes straight down. That's not really what happens, right? Even though you might observe it as straight, you have to be very careful. You should assume that it's not straight, and assume that it has a nice naturalistic gesture like this, right? Which rolls off of the nostril, comes down, hits the fullness of orbicularis oris, and kind of all the bit of the lip, the volume of the lip, the modiolus. So it comes down, routes outside of the modiolus, which will be right here, that kind of fibrous collection of tissue, and then down and terminates down in here somewhere, right? And so this lacks some of that gesture, right? You kind of want more of that rather than straight down. Okay, I think he might have a suspicious termination of the lips. This is often a problem, right? People don't quite have it fold out into the modiolus, right? You can see it's done reasonably well here. But here I don't get any sense that this crease is rolling out into a form. Okay, last thing, and this is kind of a little bit of an outlier, but the jawline doesn't make sense, right? Especially how this comes down and then has a little flare out here and then back down to this shape. Probably just an error or something, but this does a little bit better, right? You just kind of have the natural transition into the angle of the jaw, masseter in here somewhere. That's what this needs. It just needs to be smoothed out a little bit. Okay, other things, right? This temporal line is not quite sufficient. If you look at this temporal line, well, even though it may be the other side of the head, I'm not sure how the symmetry of this works out. He's got a big extra growth outside here. Okay, and I guess the laundry list continues, right? But there's no infraorbital furrow, right? There's no real good sense that there's orbit here. You can see pretty well, not just from form, but also with coloration, that this guy has a pretty good sense that the orbit is in there. So that's great. A little bit missing on this side, and then kind of the I guess the transition to from the lower tarsal plate into the orbital region is a little bit underdone in this as well. Okay, that's all for this one. That's quite a long checklist, but enough to say, you know, that you have to be very careful when you're copying, right? Because I mean, the guys probably observe very carefully. But again, this is why we're studying, is so that we can understand exactly what it is that we're looking at and realize that we have to put it in, or you know, just being aware that yeah, the temporal line goes to the edge of the orbit, and it doesn't have any, unless you have a tumor or some kind of 4 or 5 standard deviations out of the bell curve, it doesn't have a big growth on it. You know. These are the kind of things that we need to know, and it'll help us make better faces. Okay, another hyper-realistic sculpture by a different artist. And the big thing for me on this, again, it comes down to the details, right? There's something in this that I think everybody watching this can just look at and identify. And if you say it's something up here, you're wrong. For me, it's all of this stuff, right? Obviously, there's a big kind of old skin fold on the upper eyelid, but the transition of it is not working at all, right? In that it looks like it's just glued into the orbit, right, as opposed to a part of the skin, supraorbital skin, hanging down. You know, gone lax and hanging down. It just needs a little bit more taper to really sell. Some of these things just look like there's kind of a hole in it, right? And this is a component of sadness, right? So this line that he's trying to get us to read is a result of kind of what I showed on the first slide. It's brow down, so corrugator, actually unit 4, and inner up. And you can see inner up is happening. Right? We have these wrinkles and they're going up in the middle, so that looks good. Corrugator, I can see a little bit of corrugator evidence in here, right? So that seems okay. The line of the brow kind of supports it. It's a subtle action, this one not so much. But together they should give a little descent in this, which is great, and that's what it looks like he's doing, but it's just that it looks like it's not quite integrated here. Okay, that's my big problem with this one. Hopefully you guys will back me up on that. Okay, here we go. This one, I actually don't have a problem with this one. This is by a guy that I know really well. He's been on some anatomy courses, and he's an amazingly talented artist. It's just that I wanted to highlight some ideas about some possibilities in the structure, right? Some things that maybe could be better, just because even though it works great as a piece, if we're going to push this towards kind of realism, there's a couple places where it would kind of fall down. And for me, the biggest one probably is over on this side, right? And probably a little too much wrinkling here, but beyond that, I'm feeling like this, whatever is meant to be the zygomatic arch and the zygomatic bone, is not quite structurally sound enough for my taste. And primarily it's because what he's doing here with his mouth on the right-hand side is pretty much zygomatic major, right? Zygomatic major is pulling. This is kind of the vector of the smile pull, right? The nasolabial furrow is reading like the smile furrow, right? And so if we kind of extrapolate this out, we know where zygomatic major needs to go. It needs to go around to the lateral surface of the zygomatic bone, which begs the question, where are the sunglasses, right? And so sunglasses are probably in here, right? Okay, and then we have malar fat pad, and we saw that Ronnie Wood kind of sculpture, or that Ronnie Wood photograph, kind of not smiling and then smiling. I think it was Ronnie Wood. No, who else was? No, it wasn't. It wasn't Ronnie Wood. Who was it? Somebody out there in the audience is shouting at me right now. Iggy Pop. Essentially, when you pull the zygomatic major, all of this stuff is going to pop up. Right, they're going to pop up probably a little bit more, and then you might see even a little bit of tension in the zygomatic major going through here. But certainly, this guy is showing evidence of being pretty lean through the cheekbones, even though he's really kind of full through here. And so, yeah, that's kind of that's the big structural concern I have for this. Beyond that, like I said, it totally works as a piece, so, you know, my job is to kind of split hairs and and again, I'll probably just look at this as well. You know, totally plausible that this could happen, that this kind of configuration of brow down could work, but again, just based on what we know about corrugator, attaches to the glabella, originates the glabella, inserts out here on the skin. And so when it shortens, you get a kind of a fullness developing in here, which gives rise to two vertical wrinkles, or depending on how close the origins are, it can be a single wrinkle going down the middle. Okay, enough of that one. Let's see what this is about. Okay, so for this one, the big thing is obvious. It's a pretty direct reference, right? And it's actually referencing a lot of things that are really hard to sculpt, right? Some super fine wrinkle details, right? You really have to construct those on a kind of a tiny scale to get it to read properly. And so when you're doing that, when you're trying to get these wrinkles right, it really helps to understand what's generating the wrinkles, and how what's generating the wrinkles is located in relation to the skull, right? Because all those things kind of help you locate and bracket these things into the right position. Okay, and so my major concern with this is the thing that I was on about. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I always had a really hard time understanding these wrinkles, right? What motivated these. And as soon as you know that it's, you know, levator labii superioris, kind of on the nasal branch, then you can understand that that's the muscle traveling through there, and these are just kind of a buildup of surface form perpendicular to it. And knowing that, and that it operates in conjunction with the procerus, you have pretty good understanding of how to locate these. Where this over here falls down is that the same understanding doesn't seem to translate, right? He does a pretty good job of copying a lot of these forms out here. But in here, if you look up, you see this going all sorts of directions, these wrinkles. And they just don't seem to have the consistency of form over here, right? In general, if you're wrinkling in a certain area, the skin thickness of the surrounding wrinkles will be very similar to what's wrinkling adjacent to it. And so it's really hard to get tiny wrinkles like this next to decently sized wrinkles like this, all right? And how this one is forming right here doesn't make sense, right? These wrinkles are kind of running into each other. They're forming like kind of adjacent rolls cascading into each other, right? Because they have kind of a central motivator, right? The same motivator is running up underneath it and pulling it together, right? It's not like a random fold appearing in cloth, right, where it buckles in a couple of random locations. This is a very specific type of folding. Okay, so that's it. Kind of a fine point. I mean, overall, a pretty good sculpt, but again, it's important to understand construction for this very reason. Okay, I've been wanting to put this in for quite a while now. This is Albrecht Dürer's, I think it's a portrait of his mother. Obviously, she's a little bit older when he did this. And so it's in here for a number of reasons. First is kind of a structural integrity question, specifically to do with the far eye. I think you guys can see that it's kind of a little bit wonky out of its socket. And who am I to say that his eye is? I'm gonna go out and say that his mother didn't have a wonky eye. You know, a little bit of respect for the mother. That it might have been misdrawn, right? And the secret is to kind of get what we understand of the orbit kind of constructed properly and symmetrically, right? So we're kind of looking at kind of axes kind of connecting the top and bottom of the orbits, and make sure that the cheekbone kind of rolls off correctly. And then we can kind of place the balls of the eye in the orbit, right? And lay on some lids. And also kind of look at symmetry in the direction of the eyes, right? And if we just kind of, although it's not going to be gorgeous, right? My blue pen in PowerPoint is not going to make it gorgeous kind of drawing quality, but maybe I can get there if I just scratch it enough. Trying to put the ball back in the socket is the point, okay? Short of Graves' disease, I don't know anything else that pops an eyeball out like that, but maybe she did. Kind of next on the list is the frontalis wrinkles, and I'm not going to say too much more about it other than it's suspicious. It's suspicious over here where they lose continuity. In my experience, it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, because remember, like, the bell curve is nice and kind of coherent in here, but weird and wild out at the extremities. So all these kind of things can happen. And I've seen people that have really thin skin on the forehead and the frontalis region, and kind of an abundance of wrinkles. So I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. It's just kind of questionable. So if you're going to do something, that's pretty much, if you do something way out on the bell curve, you better do it perfectly. Otherwise, people are going to be very unforgiving of it, because it's going to look, just by nature, it's going to look wrong. It's going to look out of the ordinary. And then if you don't do it well, it will slip even further out in appearance. So that's kind of an idea to store away if you're kind of doing unusual portraits or people. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe some expression problems in the mouth, at least some proportional problems, but again, I don't want to pick on his mother too much. And let's see what's next. Okay, this is in here for just it's something that we've looked at already, right? It's hugely expressive, and that's great. I think it's a great caricature. I think it's Winston Churchill, right? Probably people can read that. But the thing where it falls down just a little bit is, again, in the corrugator area, right? He's pulling a great action unit number 2, right? A good outer brow up, which is doing all the right shapes in here. Probably could be stretching, lifting this up a little bit further, right? Remember, that was one of the critical things about outer brow up, is that it lifts the skin off of the eyelid, right? And kind of exposes the upper eyelid. So I suspect if Winston Churchill did this, we would be seeing a little bit more eyelid out here, especially when we're going that far, right? So that's just one suspicion. And would it improve the piece? I think it probably would. It probably would. It would make this look a little less alien in here, right? So if we just kind of had that exposed eyelid, I think it might be improved. The other thing that this was in here for was for kind of action unit number 4, right? It's always one or the other, isn't it? But again, it's down to what the construction of the action unit is. What are the muscles that drive it? And I've drawn this a few times already, so this is going to be the last time, I promise. Depression down here, bundling of skin, right? Extra relief in here, right? Extra depth. This is flat. If you look through that, that's super flat. Make sure that that has volume. Enough volume to motivate the depth of the wrinkles that you're trying to achieve, right? And the amount of stuff that's displaced out here. Right? So I think those are the major things for me on this piece. I've kind of stopped looking. I haven't looked any further than that, to be honest. But again, one of the things that might be just coming back to our ideas about structure. We know the zygomatic arch doesn't go that way. This guy's going, should be shooting about like that, but that's not kind of what the point is of this exercise is. We're looking at expressions, so I will leave that to the side, but just suffice it to say everything that we've covered up until now is still relevant and still important. So remember, okay, geez, while I'm on it, if we're talking about still relevant and still important, as I look a little bit further, I don't know, I'll leave this one out to you guys. In this area, what's the problem? Just have a quick look and a quick thought. Now again, I'm kind of making allowances for this being a caricature, but if we were sticking to our first principles, we would say that he's indicating a temporal line up here, right? And we know a temporal line is coming down to the orbit, and that's cool. And there's some skeletal structure down here, and that should all work. And you know, the margin of the orbit's here, and the lid is here, and it's pulled the skin up with outer up. All that would be fine. And if that's the case, there's one fundamental construction problem, anatomical construction problem to do with expressions, and that's these wrinkles way out here into the kind of this zygomatic, the temporal region, right? I mentioned this very specifically in the lectures that the boundary of frontalis is the temporal line, right? So all of these wrinkles are contained up here, and if they can just finish as they slide across, they'll just dissipate across the temporal line, right? So if these were anatomically correct, they would be nice and full up here where the muscle is pulling, and then, oh, temporal line, muscle's not there anymore, we're into the temporalis, and then they just kind of diffuse quite a bit faster. There's nothing to motivate the wrinkles out here. Okay? But it is a caricature, and there's certain liberties that you can take when you're doing fun, crazy stuff. Just know what rules you're breaking, and just see if bending the rules and stretching the proportions rather than breaking the rules and totally invalidating it makes it stronger, because in certain instances it does, right? The believability is of faces is pinned on all these things that we're talking about. Okay, this last one is just a little sculpt. It's kind of a little, almost I don't know, a couple centimeters tall, so it's a tiny sculpt, and this has to do with kind of wrinkling, right? And specifically, again, these are tiny details, literally and figuratively, but it's just when I was getting to talk about the way that these wrinkles in the cheek propagate, right? They don't just stop and start, right? And that's a really important thing to know, is that they, you know, if the stuff is crunching up, right? If this is all crunching up along this direction, let me change colors. You say this is our eye, right? He has action unit 5 lifting up the upper lid, right? So he's doing, kind of showing a lot of the sclera, although my colors are inverted right now. If this muscle is crunching down out here, the bicularis oculi, right, all the compression is happening along this direction, right? And then we're getting kind of an intersection of this crunching and this elevating through here, right? So kind of a little bit of zygomatic major potentially acting here, and some of the levator labii superioris kind of raising the infraorbital furrow, right? And so we're kind of getting this line, we're getting compression along this axis, and then we're getting compression coming down from abicularis oculi. So essentially we're rolling tubes of fiber off of the lower eyelid, right, and all the skin that we pulled up from the orbit. And I went through the little schematic with you, just for this kind of purpose, right, so that you can kind of understand that it's not totally imaginary, right, that these kind of forms end up happening in fairly regular intervals on people. Number, again, somewhat variable, based on kind of skin thickness and age, right? Skin thickness is correlated with age decreasing as you get older, but there is a reason to the pattern, okay? And you just don't want them to magically appear and disappear, like this one, and like this one, right? So this is a good cylindrical fold, and then it just kind of stops and turns into normal cheek, and that's not how it really works. It just kind of continue out, and then as the tension, as it gets outside of the region of the tension of the muscle, then it dissipates, right? Then it's able to unfold itself. Okay, and this one isn't quite right. This is grabbing skin from all over and putting it into a tube. This skin rolls off here, and this skin comes off here. This it reminds me a little bit of Bernini's Damned Soul, some of these lines going up here, which do happen, right, when you get kind of extreme action unit 2 combined with action unit 6, right, which is the orbicular contraction this way. You do get some conflicting wrinkles doing funny directions up, sometimes vertically. Okay, so I think that's enough about that. One more thing, I don't know if anybody spots it. It's a small thing, but again, it's a fundamental constructional principle that we've covered, and it has to do with the intercanthal tendon inserting into the orbit, and specifically, it needs to insert into the orbit. This is just kind of stopping in space, right? I'll erase that little mark, and you can press your face up to the screen and see if you can see what I'm talking about. But essentially, even though he's doing all kinds of crazy expressions, his orbit is still there, and this still attaches in, right? It needs to just come down and anchor. A little bit less of a problem on this side. I think it does anchor, but that side it just looked like the two tarsal plates joined and were just floating in space with no kind of encapsulation by the medial canthal tendon. Okay, so I think that is it for GalleryAbominate this week. Hopefully additionally instructive beyond just the regular lecture. Show you again examples of good work that just misstepped a little bit, and the idea is that all these small things are combined to make the whole stronger, right? And so if you kind of combine fantastic idea with fantastic technique and then kind of fantastic knowledge of construction and anatomy, then your piece will be kind of as cool as possible, right? Okay, so anyways, that's enough from me for this week. I will see you again next week. Thanks.